Our guest today is an ace editor and teacher whose work runs the gamut from feature films, TV series, and documentaries to books on editing and post-production. His most notable book being Art of the Cut, published in 2017, made up of conversations with top editors from his podcast of the same name that he started in 2014. Art of the Cut is an unprecedented glimpse at the techniques and art of contemporary film and television editing. The second volume was published earlier this month and expands on the first volume with insights from more than 360 interviews with the world's top editors. Steve Hullfish, welcome to Cut to Reveal.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk to you guys about editing. This is my favorite thing to do, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. I hope that intro was
That was perfect.
Was to your standard. It was
it's embarrassing hearing about myself. But I'm really proud of the book, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about it.
You know, I got this book like only a few days ago, so I haven't been able to read through all of it, right, just yet. But like just looking at at how it's laid out and reading the first chapter, I can see that like there are small differences between this volume and the first one. Like organization is a little bit different in the book, but I'm curious about like if you had any takeaways from writing the first volume that like found its way to volume 2.
My biggest takeaway was that even though I had done the interviews, all of them myself, 400 plus, and even though I'd transcribed many of them myself, it wasn't until I started sorting it and ordering it and putting it in topics that I really started to get the knowledge from it. Sure, I did the interview, but when I see it, one person's comment on pacing next to another person's comment on pacing, then I'm like, wow, you start to see similarities, you start to see differences, you start to see subtle shifts between one person's thinking and another, and things that you personally connect with. So somebody might have said something great about pacing, but that's not really me. And I'd read somebody else. I'm like, that's exactly how I feel, or that's completely new to me. I'm so excited about that idea. And so when I saw how important that was in book 1, I certainly wanted to continue it in book 2.
Was your approach different in any way when we were working on from volume 1 to volume 2?
The difference is highly embarrassing. Book number 1, even though I think you pointed out it was like 2017 or something, I literally printed out all the pages from 50 interviews. So that's about probably 1,000 pages, about 20 pages a person for 50 interviews. And one of the reasons I became an editor is because I'm crappy at math. So about 1,000 pages. And then I sat there with a paper cutter and cut the topics. Like I went through each paragraph and I was like, oh, this paragraph is about pacing. And I would cut it with a paper cutter and I would stick it in a pile,
Wow,
the pacing pile on a gigantic table. And I literally did that. And then I had these gigantic piles of little pieces of paper, little strips of paper with a paragraph in them, and was like, oh, that's a big enough pile to be a chapter. I'll do a chapter on pacing. This time around, I did it electronically. I had 3 million words of transcripts. So there's no table big enough to have done that. So I actually went through each one the same way. I would copy a paragraph about whatever the topic was from the first question in the interview, and I go, oh, that's about organization. And then I had, if I'd never done an organization topic before, I would create a document called organization, and I'd paste that paragraph into the organization document. And at the end, I had 170 topics. Yeah, some of them were as long as 200 pages long, just one topic.
my goodness! Like, how long is the final book? Like, how many words?
So to put it in editing terms, my editor's cut, the first draft of the book, was 330,000 words. And then the printed copy is 130,000. So I cut it by more than 2/3.
Oh my goodness.
Like the best, I already had it down to the best stuff. And then I took the best stuff and trimmed that by 60%. So this is like just gold.
Okay, so you've got like 1 to 25 ratio or something like that when it comes to what's on the editor's floor. And, so 1 to 25 is like a standard for a feature, I guess. So nicely done.
Well, three, I don't know what the math is, but 3 million words down to 130,000.
Yeah. It's close to 1 to 25 ratio. I'm good at maths, so.
And are you doing this by yourself, or you have like an assistant editor helping you with this stuff, or no?
No, I wish. It literally took 5 years while I'm editing. I mean, I'm an editor, so I mean, I'm editing 10 or 12 hours a day, and then I'm trying to get this done in the evenings and the weekends, on vacations. So it took 5 years of nearly constant work.
Wow.
My goodness. That's nice. That's very, that makes you appreciate this even more. So listen, one of the questions that we wanted to ask about is about like any common thread that you found, like, interviewing these great editors.
I have 3 of them. The 3 common threads that I think fall between all editors. The top one is empathy. Editors are empathetic. And that's not just in being able to look at, dailies and say, that's a truthful moment. That is, I connect with the performance there. It's also being empathetic with your producers, where you get a stupid note and you go, I could respond how stupid this note is, but I'm going to be empathetic to this person and treat them the way I want to be treated. And the director is yelling at me, and well, he's under a lot of stress. So like, I get that. I understand where he's coming from. I need to be empathetic towards the way he's treating me, and I will show him love back, So I think empathy is a huge thing in your relationships with the other people on the team, with your ability to see truth in a great performance, with all those things. Another one that's huge, and I think it's a whole chapter in the first book. I don't know if it's a chapter in this book. I think it might be, is ego. Because all the great editors, I mean, I've talked to the best editor, like Thelma Schoonmaker, Ann Coates, Joe Walker, Walter Murch. Like, these are people who should be able to just never talk to me. Why would I talk to Steve Hullfish? And really, instead, their ego is very low. They are very lovely people to be around. They don't think very highly of themselves, even though they've won multiple Oscars. So ego is a big one. And the third one, which is maybe a little less important or less obvious, but just as important, is patience. Editors just have to have a huge amount of patience. And all of them do. They see that their first cut is not good, and they're able to, like, one of my early problems, and still a problem to this day, is I just want to get it perfect. I want it to get where it's done. And I just have to realize that it's a process. And every day it's going to get better, and I just need to get it just that little bit better today. I don't have to get it perfect. I don't have to have all the answers. I just have to have one.
We interviewed some editors as well, like Elizabeth Ronaldsdottir, for example, right? I interviewed Walter Murch as well, and I feel it as well. Like I never felt like they treated me, I don't know, like they were above me in any way. They always treated me as someone equal, and that's something very special. That like that's one of the reasons, I guess, that many people in the industry say that like editors are the best in the industry, basically, right? The society of editors, in a way. And by the way, I also had, when you've mentioned about this empathy aspect, right? When I was working in a post-production house a few years back, we had a very difficult client. Like, she basically like stormed in and she said like, all of it is like shit. We have to rework all of it, the whole edit. She treated people very badly, all of the people in the room. But eventually, like the interesting thing is that I was the only person she kind of liked. because I was like, I was doing it, like I was like, okay, she was treating me badly, but I was become like staying calm and trying to, yeah, exactly with her. So
patient and empathetic.
Yeah, everyone else, like, she hated it. It was funny in a way.
My favorite bad client story is a day that I was working for an ad agency, a pretty big ad agency, and they had maybe a dozen people in the edit. And the art director came in, and the two of us were wearing the same shirt, and he made me change my shirt.
What?
I had to go out and go to the prize closet and get a company T-shirt, one of the with a logo on it. I'm like, okay, don't want to embarrass anybody.
That's crazy.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. Steve, I actually have a question that is a little bit less related to the book, but I'm just very curious. What's your preparation process when you're about to interview Joe Walker, let's say, or any other big name in the space? Do you have some kind of process that you go through before the interview?
I do usually try to prepare very well for an interview. Sometimes I get no time, or for some reason I don't have any time, and I can literally do an interview. Like if you put another editor on the thing and I didn't even know what they cut, I could do the interview without even knowing who they are, because I've just asked the question so many times.
Yeah.
And you know the process, so you can say, oh, well, you just let your curiosity take over. What's your project about? Oh, you did a TV commercial. Oh, that's very interesting. And you just go from there, and every question leads to the next question. So you don't have to do any preparation. But I do obviously usually watch the movie. If it's a TV series, I'll watch most of the TV series, if not all of it. I have IMDb Pro instead of just IMDb, and IMDb Pro has a lot more information. And so I go through IMDb Pro and look at that. I try to, if I go really deep, I actually look at all of the editors that they've worked with, or if they've been an assistant, who are they an assistant for? Because then that tells me a huge amount about their pedigree. I'm like, oh, you've been an assistant for these three people, and I've interviewed them, and so I know how they work. So what have you taken from them, for example? So I'll do a lot of IMDb Pro stuff, and I've interviewed so many people now that I've interviewed most of them multiple times, and so I'll go back and read the previous interview, and then I'll ask questions about how they've changed since the last interview, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. That's great. IMDb Pro has this connection tab, right, where you can see connections, where you can see all of the people that are mutual connections in any project that you have been working on. Yeah, this tends to be very useful.
IMDb Pro, not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor.
Just so you know.
Well, maybe they're my sponsors. So I just made $1,000.
Cha-ching, cha-ching. So kind of piggyback on that, despite interviewing hundreds of editors and multiple times, are you still surprised? Do people giving you information that still surprises you in either the way that they work or how they approach a project?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. A lot of the stuff that's makes its way into the book, where I'm like, wow, that is so different than anything that I would have thought. I have to put that in the book because it's so unusual, right? It's a new way of thinking. It's something if everything that I interviewed people about was something that I knew already or was unexpected, I wouldn't do it anymore. I don't think. I'd be like, oh, well, I know the answer to this question before I ask it. That'd be boring. But people are always surprising me with novel solutions to problems or explanations of interpersonal difficulties. Like the director didn't want this, and I figured out a way to get what I wanted, or do the best for the project, of course. So I'm always being surprised. Every single interview. I just did an interview that's going to be published Thursday with the How I Met Your Mother editor, and he is a multicam comedy editor, which I don't know a lot about that, but I know some. And one of the things he told me that I thought was really interesting is when he watches dailies, he can tell when even though he doesn't get the line cut. A line cut is, for those, I know you guys know, but for the listeners, when you're shooting a multicam show and you've got 4 cameras, somebody is pushing a button to put, to choose which camera is going to go up, and do I dissolve to it or do I cut to it? That's the line cut. He doesn't get it. I figured for sure he would get the line cut. I've done many multicam projects myself, national TV specials, music specials, concerts, Oprah's book club, and I always get the line cut. They always send me, oh, here's 2 hours of somebody's already chosen the angles. And then I pick better ones, but at least I have something to start with. He doesn't get that at all. But what he said was interesting to me is that he can tell by the applause which camera the guy is cut to, because the audience is seeing the line cut in big monitors. So they're watching the actors below and they're watching the TVs above. And he's like, oh, he must have just cut to the close-up of Hilary Duff because the audience had this reaction. He must have cut to this character because they made a funny face at that moment and the audience laughed at that. And so he can actually tell from the audio what camera they're on.
Wow.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
And when the cut happens. Yeah, so stuff like that. I'm always surprised.
Do you see any trend when it comes to using AI technologies in editing?
I've talked to other editors about this, and I'm certainly researching it myself and looking at videos and reading articles about it. But really, the topic has not come up much in my interviews at all.
Yeah.
I just know that AI is making transcription so much better. I mean, when I started this 10 years ago, you were lucky to get 80% of a transcript right. And it would take me hours and hours to clean up a transcript. Now they're so good, it's actually a problem in the reverse because nobody speaks in proper, English or whatever your language is. They, like me, I'm stuttering, I'm restarting sentences. If you translated that perfectly, it would be unreadable. So you've got to work on it a little bit. That's the only AI. It's the only AI I see.
You used to have to pay for good transcripts. Right now, it's kind of included in the package in almost all of the NLEs. So yeah, it's a big one, definitely. I'm on the fence when it comes to how AI will actually influence us as editors. I'm not really sure how strongly it will influence like feature and documentaries editing. I don't think it will quite soon. I think it's still a long way before that happens. But when it comes to assistant editors, for example, I can see like this could change quite dramatically, quite quickly. So yeah, I'm curious to hear, more perspectives on that in the coming years. That's for sure.
I really think that's where it's going to hit hard, and that could have huge implications, right? Even if it's just assistant editors, and I don't mean that in a putting down assistant editors, but here's an example. A long time ago, I heard a talk given by Walter Murch about something unrelated to editing. He was talking about the transition from film to digital. And he pointed out something really interesting. He said, well, you don't think this is going to make a difference, that there's no way this transition is going to be so total. This is whatever, more than 20 years ago. He said, but here's what's going to happen. Once we have digital projectors and all of the printing of the final answer prints, or not the answer prints, but the prints that go into the theaters, once there are no more prints for theaters, that will kill the film industry. He said it's not the shooting. The shooting is a small ratio of the amount of film that's used. Where film is really used is printing 3,000 copies of Dune, and shipping them all over the world. And sure enough, once the theaters went from 35 millimeter film projection to digital projection, that's what killed Kodak and all the rest of them and really changed the industry. So when you see that AI starts to change, for example, it's going to start taking away assistant editor jobs where maybe it can almost do sound effects for you, or it will automatically be able to read a slate and put the slate in the right bin and name the thing based on the slate information instead of having an assistant editor read it off the slate. If we kill the assistant editor jobs, that's going to have a huge impact, because where are the new editors going to come from, and how are the new editors going to learn anything? Right now, the assistant editors are learning a huge amount, even if they don't see it, by sitting in the room with us and seeing the process and being in the room with the director. And if I don't need an assistant editor anymore, then whoever gets my job as an editor next is going to have way less experience and knowledge than I had, because I was able to learn from the people above me.
I feel like what you just said, that human connection, is what is going to keep in my mind, that is what is going to keep assistant editors around longer, more so than just like having one button that you can press to do whatever. Because exactly what you said, like kind of the mentorship aspect of it, of this is another warm body in the room that I can, bounce ideas off of, and we can collaborate on working on this. Even though an assistant editor, for all intents and purposes, is just to like kind of help you organize and stuff, but as we know, there are other editors that help let them cut scenes and whatnot. So I feel like that AI will be still treated more as a tool rather than like a creative something
Yeah,
or
but on the
other.
other hand, like if like we always struggle with budget, right? And like money to be able to finish the thing. So I think like once the tools are good enough, I think it's inevitable to actually like get rid of the people and assistant editors in a way. I don't think it will happen right away for all of them, but I think it's gonna happen. I think it's inevitable. So inevitable, seriously. Like it's just a matter of economics, I think.
I feel like that. I mean, it's definitely a possibility. I'm not saying that that isn't a possibility. My rebuttal to that is that it's that thinking is bad client thinking. That's like, here's the person who wants to spend $200 on a feature film and they want the world. And oh, why don't you just use this because it's only going to be whatever. And then, it's like, okay, well, you kind of get what you pay for. And so then you've got people who are less experienced being like, well, this guy can press the button and that's going to work. And it's fine for what we need to it. But then when what you've got, like a good client knows exactly what a person's worth is, and they're going to easily spend $5,000 on a 30-second commercial for somebody who, for Steve Hullfish or Ricardo Coslino or some other
It's
editor.
not only about like a good client, bad client. It's also about like what budget they have, right? It's there is no way around it, and like especially in like features and documentaries, I think budgets are always limited, always tight. Very rarely you have as much as you want to.
The assistant editors, I agree with Ricardo that they have a huge value in helping you bounce story ideas. And, if you're in the kind of client situation like a TV edit, they're great at customer service and client services and keeping things rolling and all that. But I also agree with you that it's all budgetary, it's all economics. And when somebody realizes, hey, look, why am I paying this assistant editor if the AI can do all this stuff? They don't see the value of the storytelling aspect and the social stuff. They only see the money. And so once the money gets to that point, you're going to lose something. Or think about it. I mean, some of the editors I talk to, they have a staff of 5 or 6 people. What if through AI instead of 5 or 6 you can get it down to 2?
Yeah, exactly. That's my thinking. And by the way, I agree with Ricardo as well. Like it's valuable addition to the project, right? But again, like yeah, this economics, like it happened with writers in a way. That's the whole thing that they have been fighting for, right? No one says that like it's invaluable to have like a team of writers working on each episode. Like no one's telling that, right? I think all of the people agree that there is value in it, and there is like additional value that every person brings to the table. But but yeah, we want to make movies, and it's not cheap to make movies, as we know, right? Okay, but you've also mentioned, Steve, this aspect of like assistant editors playing an important role in kind of exchanging generations of editors. I find it very interesting because I also think that there might be a shift. There might be a shift that we can see, I think, already with many like social media creators really becoming filmmakers. And I think that more and more people, more and more editors will actually have this kind of background instead of assistant editors.
I agree with that completely. I think that there are two aspects to having somebody as a, let's call them a media creator, who's self-taught. They watch, they read my book, they watch YouTube videos. Two things are going to happen. One, you're going to get some really innovative stuff. They're thinking outside the box. They haven't been ensconced, or they haven't been kind of pushed down by this. Oh, here's the way it's always done. They're gonna be incredibly innovative. They're also going to have to reinvent the wheel about 1 billion times. They're going to make all kinds of mistakes that if they had followed a traditional path, they wouldn't have made, because they would have learned, oh, there's a reason why you don't do this or you do this, or there's a reason why you should. Most media creators are fairly insular, right? They only work for themselves. They don't have a lot of interaction with other people. Maybe there's a reason this is a collaborative art form, and that might be lost, and that is a huge reason why movies are good. It's just a fact to be able to say, oh, Steve's point might be really good there. Oh, the director, I didn't think that was a good note, but I am going to do it anyway. And if without that back and forth, the movie is highly diminished. You never achieve the full potential of that movie unless everybody's collaborating and plussing the project at their level.
Yeah, agreed.
By the way, these days we have podcasts like yours. Once Upon the Timeline, for example, many great podcasts for editors, right? So, do you think that like the consciousness around like what editors bring to the table in the filmmaking process has changed, has increased? Because like you've mentioned this, like this that's the way your first volume of Art of the Cut book starts, right? You recall this conversation that the actress
Lupita Nyong'o.
yeah, exactly. She has mentioned Joe Walker and his influence on her performance and how he played a crucial role in making this film. But I feel like it still happens quite rarely. I actually heard an actor saying something like that, very similar line, like a few weeks ago. I can't remember who it was specifically, but still, like, do you think that it has changed dramatically or just a little bit? The notion of what actually film editors do.
I think it's changed. Yes, I do. I do read more and more about big movie star actors who absolutely understand the value of the edit room. One of the proud things I have about this book is the foreword by Ron Howard, and
Oh
it's just
yeah,
a total love letter to editing. I mean, you cannot be an editor and not cry when you read how much he
that's
loves
true.
editing. And that's definitely something. I think I read Laura Dern she loves editing and editors and understands how important they are. I think Tom Cruise does, believe it or not. Many editors know how much the editor contributes, and other people, many actors know. Directors for a long time. I mean, Orson Welles, there's all kinds of stuff with Orson Welles talking about how important editing is. But to the general public, definitely not. I've got a cartoon that was in the newspaper a couple of years ago that was basically, it was a guy getting a job at the Fishing Channel. It's for an editors wanted, and it said, your job is to cut out all the bad stuff. It's
Yeah.
like, that's what people think that we do, right?
Yeah,
They don't understand that there's storytelling involved. Most people understand, oh, you have to put things together, but they almost think, oh, they shot a close-up of you saying these words, and then they moved the camera and they shot a wide shot of saying the next couple of lines, and then no. They shoot the whole thing, and we've got to choose all those elements. So people are starting to get it, but there's still more work that you need to do and I need to do.
Exactly. Yeah, Walter Murch, he has like a chapter in The Blink of an Eye about this, about like we're cutting out the bad stuff, and I don't know if you recall it, but he kind of says like that, like someone said it to him, so you only cut like bad stuff, and at first he was like, no, but then he for the back and said, like, in a way, yeah, right, and then he expands on the idea of what constitutes of that, right? Because it's more complicated than it sounds, but in a way, that's what we do. Yeah.
Walter's always right.
Yeah, that's one of the axioms. That's one of the axioms.
The guru. He's the guru.
By the way, I can't wait to get his book. He I think he wrote it already, right? I'm sure you know about this more than I do.
I can't wait. I think he's trying to get all the permission for the images that he uses. He uses a lot of pictures and graphics and stuff, and he needs to clear all that stuff.
Yeah. By the way, like talking about the books, do you have like a filmmaking book that you like to revisit? Not including yours. Like let's leave yours on the table.
No,
for
not
now.
including. I wouldn't. I would not. I would not include my book. Although hopefully somebody else would include my book, but I certainly don't. There are two. I really love Sidney Lumet's. I think it's called Making Movies.
Making movies, yes.
The Sidney Lumet book is probably one of my favorites. I really like that. And the Rebel Without a Crew by
yeah, Rodriguez.
Rodriguez is really interesting. I really like that book. Of course, In the Blink of an Eye is really solid. I love the Cold Mountain book. I thought the Murch's Cold Mountain book is really good. The Conversations, written by Michael Ondaatje. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name, but the one that he did. I don't know. You'd have to look at my Twitter feed and look for pictures of books. I have a big pile of directing, editing, and screenwriting books. In the screenwriting books, one of the best ones is actually called Into the Woods, which is really more about storytelling than it is literally script writing. But I really like Into the Woods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I haven't read this one. I haven't read Into the Woods, but it's on my list. And like Making Movies by Sidney Lumet, it's actually one of the books that I revisit quite often. Even last year, I was directing like a short film, and before directing it it was kind of like my directing debut. I read it again, and it's so good. It's so good. Like written also very lightly. You read through it like through like an adventure book almost. So good, so good.
Yep. I've read it multiple times.
So I was going to ask in regards to the influences of these books and stuff, but taking it back to the interviews that you've done, has it changed the way that you edit? Listening to these interviews or influence you in a different way from maybe not from interview to interview, but just in general from where you started?
Yes, absolutely, it has. And that's one of the reasons why I started doing these interviews. To be honest, before I did the interviews, I cut one feature film, and I have come up through an unusual path myself. I've never been an assistant editor, and so I knew there was a huge amount of stuff that I didn't know about editing. And so I started doing these interviews. Mark Sanger and Joe Walker were the first two. Gravity, when Mark won the Oscar for Gravity, that was, and then Joe with 12 Years a Slave the same year. They were both nominated that year, and I hoped it was going to change the way I edit it. That's what I was looking for, and things that I've changed that I can like most off the top of my head explain would be organization, bin organization, and my approach to a scene has changed because I've picked up little tips from people that I'm like, that is a great idea. Oh, I really like that. And as I've done more and more interviews, I've changed because I'll pick up one great idea and start editing that way. And then, 2 years later, when I'm cutting another feature or another TV show, I've learned so much more, and I'll go, oh no, I think I'm going to do something different. And I'll change the way that I work. And other editors are the same way. I know I've interviewed Eddie Hamilton probably 5 times. And I mean, he's cut great stuff. And like, why should his process change? It's so good. But every movie, his process changes because he learns new things and he wants to expand and he wants to get better and do things more efficiently or whatever, be more creative. Lots of editors, it's a common question that I ask in my interviews is, how have you changed from the last time I talked to you to this time? What's changed in your editing style? And then if that person has changed for a reason, I think, wow, that's a valuable thing for me. I should maybe think about changing that way.
Yeah, that's great. I'm in the midst right now of editing my first feature. And so listening to your podcast and getting the first volume of the book has really helped And for me, at least at this point, it was more about understanding like what do I need to do. It was like I know how to edit, but like a narrative feature is different than obviously a documentary, a commercial, awareness video, whatever. So just being able to have those tools of like, okay, well, this is a feature film. This is different. We got more moving parts. Like, how do I organize and stuff like that? Really helped me to like do that. And I've already noticed like from day one to now, this is like day, we'll say 75, that, becoming more comfortable and being able to like organize things better and know where things are, but then also cutting the scenes differently than I did when I first started and whatnot. And kind of going back to what you had said previously, when we were talking, is like learning that things don't have to be completely perfect to move on to like the next step of, okay, we're on a timeline, but we're trying to get to the next thing. So I don't have to have like this pristine polished silver cut of a scene to move on. It's just like we got to be able to get the idea and then we move on, because I've learned that it's like, okay, this is a collaboration. The director's going to look at it. He's going to be like, this is awesome. It's not, but it's inevitably going to be between me and him about how we move forward. And so that had helped me a lot in regards to like being efficient and being effective in the way that I edit scenes, as well as organization and whatnot. So for that, I thank you very much, Steve, for all that you do.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's been said, I mean, even not about learning from something like my book or from, I don't know, other experience, even just many editors have said the way you would edit a scene on day one is completely different than the way you would edit a scene 2 months later, when you know the characters better, when you're completely engrossed in the story, when you have a better sense of the dailies you're getting in the director's style. Your editing evolves in one project just because the project is teaching you things. There's a great analogy in the book that I really like about a spider. I read this great book about not spider senses, animal senses. And they said that a spider, of course, has a sense of touch, but the spider's sense of touch extends to the web, and the web extends to what the web is attached to. And so the spider's sense of touch is actually almost the entire universe, the universe of the web and what it touches. And we are similar. Our brains are in our skulls, but once we start looking at dailies, now our brains have kind of spread out. Our senses have spread out to learn from and interact with the dailies in the same way that a spider's senses extend through the web.
Such a good analogy. Spider sense.
Spidey sense. All editors have spidey sense.
What are you doing using my spidey sense?
This is what you pay me for.
That's right.
Okay, Steve, like, first of all, like, is there anything that you want to say about your new book, about volume 2? And secondly, how far are you with volume 3? Because I know, and that's actually how we kind of got together here, that you tweeted about working already on volume 3, which will be about documentary editing. Yeah, so can you talk about that?
Sure. Volume 3 is started in the process of cutting up the pieces of paper and putting them in the piles. That's kind of where I am now. I'm doing it electronically again, but I started out with I don't know how many words, not as many as Volume 2, but probably 500,000 words. So now I'm taking, I think it's 80 interviews. So it's someplace between the first volume and the second volume, how many editors I've talked to. And I'm putting the interviews into these categories and starting to build the categories. Once I do that, then it comes a lot faster, because now I'm going, okay, I've got a pacing chapter and I have 100 pages and I need to get it down to maybe 10. So then I'm trimming it down to just the best stuff, and then I'm trying to put it in an order that seems like a conversation. So that'll be the next step. It'll take me another year to finish this one, I think, but it's definitely started. As far as Art of the Cut Volume 2, the thing I want people to realize is there are no perfect answers. Like, what I want you to get out of reading the book is the things that speak to you. Like, not to think of everything as gold or everything as gospel, but to read through and find something on a page that you're like, wow, I've either got to try that, or I completely agree, or that means something to me. I want you to read the book with a highlighter. Like, I want sticky notes and I want post-it notes in the book going, oh my gosh, I got to remember this one thing out of the chapter. Make the book your own. Don't read it in order. The first chapter is the most boring chapter there is, organization. Hopefully there's great stuff in there that you learn from, but jump around. And when you're stuck in something, when you're like, oh man, like Ricardo's in the middle of cutting a movie, if you're at the point where you're like, structure, I wonder if I could reorganize the scenes. Just go straight to the structure chapter and see what the structure chapter has for your current project. Do not read the book linearly. I mean, you can, but you don't need to.
That's a great tip. I think that's what I always, whenever I was talking about Art of the Cut with someone, that was that was kind of like my takeaway. That, like, it's, if you read it like from page one to the end, it's not an easy book to read, because it's like, it's a different conversations put together, stuff like that, right? But that's what I always say, that like the value is in finding those like golden nuggets, and also about understanding that there is no one right way. That, like, successful people, very successful people do it very differently and still get great results. So you just have to find something that resonates with you greatly. And I also thank you for saying that, like, use highlighter, because I approach the reading this way. Like Art of the Cut Volume 1, like, I'm not sure if you can see it, but I have like these like underlines and notes on the side, because like I actually had like a disagreement with our third host of the podcast, who's he's not here today, but Erwan, like, he runs the podcast with us. And yeah, he was like, I can't write on the book. And I'm like, come on, it's for you to use, not to like admire it. Okay. Everyone, sorry, but I hope that you'll change your mind.
Please write all over the book. My copy of the Sidney Lumet book is just filled. I've got notes in the side. I write things in the margins.
Me too.
I underline with a pen. I highlight. Yeah, all the pages are dog-eared. It's a book. Use it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a sacred thing.
Especially that book. I mean, it's sacred, but it's also that great reference. Yeah, I'm always looking for a highlighter. I had been complaining when we are always talking about reading, because I'm reading Art of the Cut linearly. I'm reading it all the way through. But I'm also like, oh, I wish I had a highlighter, because there's so many good things that, as to your point, like, oh, I love the way that, Joe Walker talked about this, or Eddie Hamilton talked about this, or, just stuff like that is, my copy will definitely be dog-eared. And,
that's part of the design of the book too. I don't think anybody will be able to see this, but I mean, the other thing about the book is I kind of do the highlighting too. They've got these call out quotes like this. Like, to me, those are like, wow, that's a nugget. So you can literally just go through and just look at the boxes, just look at the box quotes. I did want to point out another analogy, and I believe I use this in the book. I used to do a martial art called Hapkido, and they would teach you like 20 different defenses for an attack. So if somebody comes at you with a knife, what do? And they would, why would you teach me 20 ways? I only need one, right? If somebody's coming at me with a knife, I can't do 20 different things. But the point is, some of them are designed because I realize how my body works. Like, oh, I'm not very flexible, so I can't kick the knife out of the guy's hand. I could never get my leg up that high. But, maybe between me and a girl that's next to me, I weigh 210 pounds and I'm 6 feet tall. So some of the more weight-based or strength-based defenses make more sense for me than for her. She's more flexible maybe than I am, so maybe she could kick the knife out of the guy's hand. That's the way this book should be used, where it's not just, it's your own personal preference for sure. Like, oh, I like this grab, I like this hold, whatever it is, I like this move. But it's also who your opponent is. If the opponent is a guy who's 6'8" and weighs 350 pounds, you're gonna attack that person or defend yourself from that person in a much different way. That's just like a project, an editing project. You might use some techniques for a rom-com, and you might use some other techniques because you're cutting an action film. So what's the circumstance you're in, and what's personally useful to you what resonates with you?
I love this analogy. That's the first martial arts analogy for editing I've ever heard, and I love it. I did jujitsu for a long time, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And like me, I'm 5'5", 140 pounds, and rolling with like somebody who's 200 pounds, compared to like like a woman who's like 110 pounds, and it's very different. And even though it's kind of the same idea of like problem solving, you have to approach it very differently. And that such a perfect analogy for the different projects that we work on, from scene to scene to project, regardless of if it's film or otherwise. It's awesome. That was the best.
The best.
One more reason why you need to highlight, because you're like, this is me, this is my project. I don't need to highlight the one for the 110-pound woman. I need to highlight the one for me.
Yeah.
The inflexible 210-pound guy. Yeah.
Right. It's what works for you. That's why it's not like, here's the one thing, here's the silver bullet that works for everybody. It's like, okay, if this is what you like, if this is your game, as we would say, then this is how it's gonna benefit you, and this is how you're gonna attack those things.
Amen.
Thank you so much for doing it with us.
It's been great.
Great chatting with you guys. Thanks for doing your podcast too. Bye-bye.